Because of the way the universe is created, we each of us live in two worlds at the same time. We have to live in the outer life of our own bodies and the inner life of our own souls.
Hello and welcome to Living the Inner Life. I'm your host, Chris Sheridan, and I want you to join with me on a journey into our inner lives, the realm of thought, feeling, emotion, memory, experience, all these things that go on in this interior part of ourselves that have a big influence on how we respond to, interact with, and how we can better approach the outer world and live a much better total life. All right, so do you ever get the feeling like we're living in the Matrix? Like we've gone down the rabbit hole and maybe this whole construct, this whole life, this reality that we're living is actually a simulation and maybe we're asleep somewhere. Now I know there's the song, Row, Row, Row Your Boat, down the stream, merrily, 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 life is but a dream. And I thought that was always weird as a kid when we would sing that song. Like, if life is a dream, if this is a dream, am I somewhere else sleeping right now? Possibly. Who knows? A lot of cultures throughout history have placed a lot of emphasis on the dream world, this dream time. Some Aboriginal tribes in Australia actually believe that that's the more real reality than this waking time, that we use this awake time to hunt and survive and do all the things we need to do to keep the organism going. And then we go to sleep, and then you're actually back into reality. Interesting thought. And there's been a lot of interesting thoughts and stories and theories revolving around what is now called simulation theory, but it goes way back, probably prehistory. We know from Plato's cave allegory that there are people deep inside a cave and they are looking at shadows on the wall. There's a light coming in behind them that they don't see, and there are people putting on essentially a shadow puppet show, and that's projected against the wall, not too unlike our modern movies. And when people's backs are turned to the light, to the outside, outside of the cave, they're fixated on these moving pictures and images, and they think that is real. All right, but if they turn around and step into the light and maybe go outside, they will see that there's another version of reality. Okay, and even in the 1600s, Rene Descartes, the philosopher who I'm sure you've heard, I think, therefore I am, cogito ergo sum, as he said. How this is a very interesting way of looking at this because he actually spent a lot of time looking into and talking and writing about this theory that possibly I'm somewhere else, that this around me is an illusion. It's like a dream, okay? And where he got to that famous quote was, he may not be able to distinguish between whether this reality that he's experienced is actually real, or if it's some kind of illusion or dream. It's so real that he may not be able to tell the difference, but the difference is, and this is where the I think, therefore I am comes in, is that he recognizes that he is a thinking entity, pondering whether or not this reality is actually real or some kind of dream or illusion. All right, and just to take that a little bit further, that cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, sometimes is translated more into I feel, therefore I exist. So it's not just thinking that you have a feeling, sensory, and internal experience, inner life, and that's what makes the difference. So whether or not this reality is real, or it's a simulation, a video game, virtual reality, or a dream, the point is we're lucid, we're actually awake, and we can ponder, like you said, like Descartes did, whether this is a dream, and we can maybe do something about it. All right, very interesting. Okay, and this is in other Eastern traditions, this notion of Maya, this world of illusion, okay, and that we're here to somehow deal with this illusory world and then move on in greater realms into a more real reality or ultimate reality. So I'm wondering if this is something that can be useful. All right. Now, it's a great thought experiment like Descartes did. And it's great to watch movies like The Matrix that really spend a lot of time. Well, actually, the whole thrust of that movie was that Neo was living in this matrix, this computer simulation. His body was somewhere else, but he was hooked up into a machine, and then he was pulled out. He was awakened from this dream. And the characters in the Matrix, there's Morpheus, who was the god of dreams. His father was Somnus, the father of sleep. So even the naming of the characters has something to do with this dream. Wake up, Neo. He wakes up so many times, like from sleep at his apartment or on the Nebuchadnezzar, the ship that he's on once he's woken up. There's this waking up, wake up. And it's not just waking up from a sleep like you're slumbering, but it's really becoming awakened. Right? The Buddha was asked, "Are you enlightened?" And his answer was, "I'm awake. I'm awakened." And I think that's this awakening. And I want to look further into how this thought of whether or not we're in a simulation might actually be useful. How can this benefit us in our lives if we're in a simulation or not, or we're just dealing with that concept, with pondering that idea? Okay, we may not know the difference. We may not be able to tell the difference, but we may be able to get a handhold on something, or a foothold, if you will, and do something that we can improve our lives with, or our experience with life, or use this knowledge or this potential knowledge. Again, I don't know how provable it's going to be, but it can be used as something beneficial in our lives. And before getting into that, I want to take a look, speaking of Buddhism, at reincarnation, and Hindus too. This notion of multiple lives, that we're born again. We have this wheel of karma that keeps turning. Each time we come back, we learn a little more. We bring into the world the unfinished business of a previous life. And we do work in this one-room schoolhouse that some people think the Earth and this planetary experience really is. We're here to learn. We're here to grow and share and help others learn and grow. And it may take many lifetimes. It may take hundreds of lifetimes. Again, this is something not overtly provable. Okay, and it's something I've thought about over the years. And I don't know exactly. I can say I 100% believe in rebirth and reincarnation, although I'm very much leaning that way because it makes sense in a lot of ways. As creatures on this planet, we're very different than most other mammals. Most young mammals and other types of animals, creatures, have a relatively short gestation period. And then after they're born, there's a very steep, very quick learning curve to where you are biologically mature. That is, you're able to then reproduce. You become an adult. It may take a year or two for a deer. I think for cats, it's less than a year before they're able to give birth again. I think mice, it's probably weeks. I don't know. Rabbits, very good at reproducing. So it doesn't take that long for them to become physically mature and mature, I guess, in any other way. But if you look at a human, we're 9 months in the womb. And then, it's a couple years before we can really, at least a year and a half or so before we can walk very well without falling. And then it's, maybe age 12, 13, 14, puberty, where we're able to reproduce. And we're not finished growing probably until our early 20s. We're not mentally mature until we're more experienced as an adult. And emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, a lot of us don't grow up. We don't grow up very far or beyond a certain point. And then we only have so many useful years before there's a decline and we're not actually able to contribute like we did when we were in our 20s, 30s, and 40s and ages like that. So there's a long learning curve and development phase. Then there's a relatively short activity functional phase, because after a certain, at least, for women at a certain point, 40s, 50s, you're generally not able to give birth again. So that may only be a 35, 45 year window where that's really possible or advisable. Okay. So this length of time that it takes to get up to speed, and then in a lot of ways, a relatively short percentage-wise time of our lives to be productive, and kind of a longer period of time where we're either in decline or just reduced capacity. We can shift into different roles, of course, and be 100% productive and very much contributing to society, just taking on a different role. Okay? And because of this, and one of the reasons actually why we're born so underdeveloped compared to most other animals, especially mammals, is the size of the head. We have big brains, and, well, I don't know if we use them or not, but we do. It would just be impossible to come out through the birth canal if we stayed in any longer and developed much further. All right? So for these reasons, the human is kind of unique in the earth creature realm. And as a result, because we have such a long time to get up to speed and a long time of decline and a relatively short productive adult phase, that we only get to do so much. We can only accomplish so much. We can only move our development forward so much that we have to come back. Okay, we have to do it piecemeal, sort of like an installment plan or something. We have to return. And of course, with reincarnation, there's a lot of different theories and beliefs about it, thoughts about it. I really don't think karmically, if you have a relatively bad life, or you go about doing things poorly or treating people poorly, that you're going to come back as, a sewer rat or a cockroach, or, there's some sort of punishment. I don't believe in the punishment phase or idea of karma. It's just that we have so much to do. We have so far to develop, and it takes a long time. Now, you've probably heard people say, oh, he's an old soul, meaning probably that you've been around several times before, or somehow that's carried in consciousness in this life. Some people are wise and mature far beyond their years. And there are full-grown adults that are, about as mature as 8th graders when it comes to a lot of things. Okay, so we develop at different rates. Maybe some have been here longer, multiple births, if that's a thing. But it's an interesting concept. And where I'm going with this is that, what's the difference? If this is one and done, or if we have to come back over and over and over again to learn something and to grow. Does that make a difference in a very practical way on how you live your life now, how you're going to live this life, no matter how many you get? Does the one life or the multiple life versions have a different influence and impact on how we treat ourselves, how we treat others, and how we approach life and the world? Well, on one hand, it would be easy to say, well, if I'm just going to come back anyway, hey, eat, drink, and be merry, and not even worry about it. I'll just come back later. Another way of looking at that is, oh, geez, I'm coming back later. I'm coming back again. I better make things a little bit better for the next me that I respawn into, to use a video game term. Okay? Set yourself up in a much better way. Again, not necessarily that you have to pay for what you did wrong in a previous life, but that you only got so far and you have to pick it up where you left off and right the wrongs and move forward. Okay? So I think that can have an impact. It might be that, geez, I better live a better life now for my future self. Okay? And that future existence, not just personally, but in my relations in the world. Maybe we meet some of the same people and they're in some other body the next time, and we have to do this over and over and over again, like Groundhog Day. Maybe that's a thing, but whether you firmly believe that or not, if you can just entertain that idea, it might impact the way you live your life. And that's how it has been for me. I feel not only by taking care of my health am I helping this lifetime out, so I'm not at old age, paying for it in some horrible way, or just living this adult life in such a way that's, that I'm not as sick or I'm not as run down, or any other way that, living poorly can make you be. Okay, so living better, living more healthily, I'm having a better life. I have fewer sick days, and I seem to recover from illness and injury quickly. And so it works within this life, but I'm also thinking, well, geez, that's going to help me possibly, if that's a thing, reincarnation. It would help me in my next incarnation. Okay, now it may not be the same body and all that stuff. It may not look the same way. But if there is soul survival, if there is this infinite life with finite installments of existence, you can't skip a step. If you don't make it through this grade, you have to come back and repeat third grade, and then move forward. And we can only move so much. We can only grow and learn so much in a lifetime, but that's the challenge, okay? And if we're in a simulation, I think it's very similar, or just the possibility of a simulation, okay? And this can go beyond that. And I guess getting back to Plato and his allegory of the cave, we can, within this lifetime, become more awakened. All right? We can recognize that we are looking at shadows cast upon the wall and we're in a cave looking the other way. We can turn and see the puppets and the light shining against them, and the puppeteers, the puppet masters that are casting these shadows. And then there's people outside the cave. There's a world outside the cave. Okay, that can happen here. It happened in the Matrix. Okay, Neo got unplugged from the Matrix system and was able to, I guess, be born again in a sense, or for the very first time, at least in the world of the real, that he was able to then see beyond that. Okay, and then he could go back into the Matrix and know more about it, know how to maneuver, recognize that it's a video game in a sense, that it's in a way unreal, even though there's very real consequences that can happen within the Matrix, just like in the dream world. That's a question a lot of people have wondered for a long time. If you die in your dream, does the sleeper, the dreamer, die in real life? I don't know. I have woken up from dreams I'm out of breath because I was running in my dream. I wasn't running in the bed, but I was out of breath because I had a very intense dream that seemed very real. So if this is a simulation, we can, first of all, recognize it as that, and recognize that there are people that aren't ready to recognize that at least in this existence, maybe that's how they're going to live, thinking it's real, but participating and maybe growing at the speed that they are growing. But if you're more awakened and you can see this facade or see through the veil and get to a larger truth, then you have a chance to not only know how to maneuver in that world in a better way, you maybe even have a chance and the possibility and the power to help shape what that is, to maybe help reprogram this simulation to the degree that we can, just like we can reprogram our minds. So ask yourself, is this a simulation? Am I running a simulation? Am I behaving like I'm in a video game and this stuff is fake, or it seems real, but that somehow I'm a player with a controller, and instead of going through the motions and just existing, that I actually have agency, that I have power to maneuver, to make choices, beyond, and think beyond the box. All right. And I think that's the metaphor. I think that's where it can become useful, whether it's actually a simulation, whether it's actually a dream and actually non-actual. You can debate that, but to think of it as a dream and a simulation, what can you do about it? Can you maneuver? It's called lucid dreaming, when you're aware within your dream, within your sleep, that you are a dreamer in a dream. And you're not just taken on this journey, this dream movie that plays out as a participant. You're actually able to make choices, conscious choices about what goes on, that there's this agency. So to look at the world and your life as possibly a simulation, what makes it real? How can you get in touch with that reality, like Rene Descartes did, when he thought, if I can't distinguish between actual reality and a dream world, what I can recognize is my feelings, my thoughts, my existence. So I exist somewhere. If it's somewhere else with a video game controller, or if it's somewhere other place where you're asleep and you're dreaming all of this, or you're plugged into a computer matrix, if you are aware of yourself, the I am, okay, capital I, capital A-M, I am that I am, then you have power to maneuver in this world, real or otherwise, and maybe even more power to help change and restructure. There may be rules to the simulation and this dream, but knowing more about them, knowing that you're possibly in this simulation and can do something about it, can help lead you on a path to where you have more personal power and you're not just thrown about by circumstance and condition and other people's rules, this construct. We have a reality that is kind of made up anyway. Even if this is 100% real, the belief systems can be simulated. They can be caged in a very narrow or limiting kind of way that, like the people in the cave, you're only getting some of the picture and thinking that's the entire picture. Okay? Same with yourself. Okay, you may look at yourself, think about yourself, feel about yourself as being a certain way, a certain limited way with limited power, limited abilities, limited time, and get beyond that. Maybe there's more to it. Maybe there's more to this world, that if we tune in and pull back from the images that are so dazzling on the screen, and maybe turn around and see what's behind it, lift the veil, and see that there's another mechanism, another construct, another reality, another way of looking at ourselves and this world that might give us more power, more agency, and more of an ability to make our way through the world in a much better way. Well, thank you for letting me into your world, and food for thought, something to think about. Let me know what your thoughts are, and we'll see you next time here on Living the Inner Life.